it can be a very terrifying thing to reinvent yourself and then to tell other people, whether it be your worker, your coworkers, your significant other, your family members, that you are trying to do something different or you want to go in a different direction.
Hey guys, welcome to episode number 253 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. If you've ever felt like making a big change in your life, but thought you were crazy for even imagining that you could do something so bananas as switching a career, changing relationships, moving, selling your house, pick a thing that we as humans sometimes get a nudge towards doing, and then it scares the heck out of us. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you're like, I really need to make a change in this area, but I'm too scared. I need to make a change here, but I'm afraid what people will think. Those moments are real and they happen to all of us. And today's guest, Anita Rombough, will help you walk through these one by one. Anita Rombough is a soul strategist, success coach, inspirational speaker, spiritual guide, and host of the wildly popular Anita Chat podcast. I mean, how clever is the name of that podcast? Anita Chat. She's so good, you guys. Her written work has received an honorable mention from Hay House, a world-renowned publisher. And as a gentle yet bold change agent, Anita helps fellow big-hearted dreamers discover and align their soul with their sole purpose to achieve their version of soulful success, the sweet spot where personal fulfillment meets impact and financial prosperity. So, if you've been struggling with a decision you need to make, or there's more for you, right? You know that feeling? Like, I feel like we've been really up against this over the last couple of years as like a collective humanity of like, is this it? Is this all there is for me? And we talk about that in the episode. We're going to hit on, the quiet resignation that's been happening, the great resignation that happened, this ache so many people are feeling towards wanting more, but not necessarily more stuff, not necessarily more money, more life, more joy, more connection, and more love. And that is Anita's game. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to this episode. So pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Oh my gosh, Anita, we're about to do this. I'm so excited. Welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I love it. I love it. All right, you guys, I have to tell on us a little bit. So we were talking about how much we have in common, how much we speak the same language, Anita and me. And we're so excited, you guys. I just have to share. Those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see this, but we just pulled this card. We thought it was important for people to see. It says daydream. I know, right? It's so cool. So we are going to be daydreaming all through this episode, which is so fitting because Anita, you support people in kind of redefining success. We're talking about abundance. We're talking about, being connected and aligned. And you do all of this beautiful work for people and with people. And so now I have to ask you, of all the things that you could have done on planet Earth, why is this the path that you've chosen to walk?
Well, why don't we start with, of all the things I could have done, I've done a lot of things on planet Earth. So this is a reinvention, and I think we're all constantly reinventing and evolving, right? That's
Mm,
what life is all about. So in
for
this
sure.
evolution, I would not want to be anywhere else. I call myself a soul strategist, a life and success coach. I'm also a best-selling author, a fellow podcast host, a keynote speaker, but the language that I speak about, or my love language, is really the language of what I call soulful success.
Mm.
And that is creating a world or a definition of success that resonates both on the inside and on the outside. So many of us, myself included, have kind of chased that path of shoulds, have kind of gone through the motions of what we think definition of success should look like. And we're putting all this emphasis on the external part, right? Like what we call ourselves at work. I mean, that's like the second thing that people say, hey, my name is so and so. Oh, what do you do? So and so, right? It's like it defines us in a way, right? We
Yeah.
judge each other based on that, our paychecks, what kind of flashy things we have, all those kinds of labels and accolades. And I feel like that is a definition of success, but that's not my definition of success. I like that stuff, but I also, more importantly, want to feel fulfilled and impactful So, soulful success is when you're really coming home to yourself, you're authentic, you're aligned. And because you're doing all that inside work to really just stay true to yourself and your passions and your dreams and your gifts, that is what brings that abundance in. So, it's not an all or nothing kind of thing, but it's having all the things, but feeling good about it, not doing it because it's something that you should be doing, but something that truly speaks to you and lights your heart on fire.
I love that. It is like the permission, but also the focus on creating from the inside out.
That is
Right?
right.
Which, gosh, in our world, isn't that hard?
It is so hard.
I
And
mean,
like
can
I
we be
said,
honest for a hot second? Oh my gosh, so
I call
hard.
myself like I'm a coach, right? And this is what I do and I get to unlock it. And so that's why I'm like, why wouldn't I be at the heart of this, right? Why wouldn't I want to be a change agent in somebody's journey? But in order to go through it, you have to go like to lead somebody through it, you have to go through it yourself. So I come from that background as well, right? I've have 3 university degrees in psychology, and because I love mindset and how we think and how it shapes everything that comes into our lives, right? I was an occupational therapist, so as a regulated healthcare professional, I worked one on one with people and coached them, also groups, but really help them focus on what was meaningful and purposeful to them. So, like
Mhm.
helping them see that they're more than just a medical diagnosis, they're a greater thing. And that's kind of like what I'm bringing into my work now. Now, having said that, after doing OT for 10 years, I wanted more. And so I went back to school. I did a pivot and I went back to school as a mature student, sat in a classroom in my 30s, and I got my MBA. And then I worked in the corporate world for over 10 years, really doing like large scale transformative stuff in the area of healthcare. So, health and well being,
Wow.
mindset, working one on one, creating change, all of that has always been such a pivotal part of who I am. And I feel like, again, through that journey, I was class president. I had dean's honors lists.
Not
I
surprised.
came from very
Yeah.
humble beginnings, so I worked my tail off. Like I had no
Mm.
financial support to do these 3 degrees, and so like I got all of those external definitions of success. Right, I had various titles, and I moved up in my career. But that was when I realized, like, okay, so I work so hard for this, partly because, to be honest, I come from, as I mentioned, humble beginnings, right? My parents were immigrants. I'm an only child. They came to this country with $7 in their pockets,
Oh my
determined
God.
to make a better life for their people, like the next generations to come. And I'm just that person, right? So, like everything, like they didn't say anything, but I felt it. I felt the need to show up. That was my FU fuel to be like, I'm going to make their sacrifices worth it. But in the process of doing so, I felt really like burnt out. I felt like there was something missing. I
Mm.
enjoyed what I was doing, but it didn't really light my life like on fire. It wasn't, it just, I couldn't help but think, is this it? And the one thing that I realized through this journey, and again, I mentioned it's a constant evolution, right? Was that one piece of me that I didn't really integrate or embody into that external definition because I didn't think that we could. I thought like it had to be like nicely compartmentalized, right?
Mm.
And that was that I've always been deeply spiritual, deeply intuitive. My background is Indian. So, I come from this rich ancestry of yoga and meditation and, all this beautiful goodness that I embodied on a daily basis, but not for the external world to see, right? And so it was only when I allowed myself to truly be me, to
Mm.
like allow all of my gifts to shine through,
Yeah.
that could I combine in this evolution as a soul strategist and success coach, that soul piece, right? That spiritual, deep introspection, self discovery that's like rooted in ancient wisdom with the mindset, with the like coaching methodologies, with data and strategy. And that to me has like helped me kind of position myself in this way to help not only identify my gifts and strength and unlock my mission and purpose, but also so that I can live soulfully successful every day.
Mm.
And how can I create that in other people? How can I be that change agent to help them find that way with all of these different tools that I come across?
Oh.
So I'm so sorry. That might have been a long answer.
Well, it's a rich, full answer, right? And I think when we really find our soulful path, I guess that energy that lifts us up, that in the daily, right? Because we all have tasks we don't want to do all day. Like I get the don't
Yes.
want us daily, right? We all do all the unsexy, quiet, invisible tasks nobody knows but us that we have to do in order to make things work. When you hit a moment that's like, oh my gosh, I get to do this, that's everything. And it's a journey to get there, right, Anita? I mean, it is
Oh
a
my
big journey to
God.
get there. It doesn't happen. People are like, I meditated one time and nothing. It's like, oh my gosh, that's not how this works. It's like a whole like journey and adventure. And I love what you've said about what your parents did for you, but also your whole entire heritage. And I don't know, have you read that book? Oh, shoot. I can't remember the other author. It was Oprah Winfrey and someone else. Oh, please forgive me. I hate it when I do that, but I will put it in the show notes after I look it up. But it's called What Happened to You. Instead of
No, but I
like this
can't
idea.
wait to put this on my reading list.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's an audiobook too. If you're subscribed to Audible, it's in there as well. But it really like was written with this journey to help us all stop saying, what's wrong with you when someone is doing something that doesn't seem to make sense? They're behaving or responding in a way that doesn't seem to match the circumstances, to change that question to what happened to you? And in the book, they go into this whole depth of understanding of what infants and nonverbal humans pick up in the environment. And so when you said, they never said this to me, but I knew, I just was like, oh my gosh, it just reminded me of that book and how much we take in as humans from our ancestry, from those that were around us all of our lives, even if they didn't say expressly, you
Yeah.
are the generation we've done this for, right? Like, but you've got this like energy and this momentum behind you because you're standing on all of their shoulders. And I love not only that you acknowledge that, but that we talk about how much that happens to each of us. We really
Yeah.
have these humans behind us, you know? So cool.
And to your point, like that is so beautiful. To your point, like that journey is so complex, right?
Ugh,
For
yeah.
me, when I got to this point, so what happened to me was during the pandemic, I got restructured out of my corporate job. And to be honest, the intuitive side of me was sensing for a couple of years that there was a huge change in the making.
Mm,
And I didn't know what it was all about, but I'm a lifelong learner. So, as you know, 3 degrees, yada, yada. But I'm always in a course. I'm always, as a coach, I'm always invested in there's
mhm.
always learning and growth and development. Like my soul needs to do that at all
Yeah.
times. I need to feel expansive and like I'm learning. So, I had joined at that point in time, I started writing my first book, which ended up getting a honorable mention from Hay House. So,
Wow.
I'm really, really excited about that. Yeah. But like,
Such
there
a
was
big
like
deal.
that creative spark in my soul that said, you got to write a book. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm writing about. I don't know how to write a book. But somehow I ended up in their writers community and it literally
Mm,
fell into my inbox. Like I've never received an email from them before. So when you ask or when you're open to being shown the path, those
mm,
answers come to you. And so that was my point of digressing into that direction. But the point is, I was like teeing myself up to learn and kind of go beyond the traditional boundaries that I had experienced through my education and through the corporate world. And when the time came that I got restructured, it was really an interesting part of my life because I was like, well, I've done a lot of weird things in my life. Like, hey, I went from like, okay, so psychology and biology to therapy. That makes sense. Okay, I get that. But then therapy to business, and then the different things I've done within the business. And now you want to do entrepreneurship? Like, you don't know a thing about entrepreneurship, all those limiting beliefs, all those things that
mm,
I have specialized in learning. I again had to work through myself to just really figure out. And it was only in retrospect in another book that I co-authored, the best-selling Lighthouse Project, where I recount my journey about like just how all of a sudden all those random pieces that I felt like, at the time that it made sense, but when you look back, it's like it just looks like I did a smorgasbord worth of stuff. And like, what was this all for? Right. And did I waste all this
yeah.
time? And it's
Mm,
like, no, you actually didn't. Like all of those things have gotten you to right where you are today. And you are now living like the most authentic, aligned, abundant life for yourself. And you're doing this for other people. And
mm.
this is where you're supposed to be right now. And again, who knows where that next little, where the next part of the journey takes us. But it is long and complicated. It doesn't always make sense, especially when you're in the thick of it. And yeah, there is definitely, societal pressures, intergenerational pressures and expectations. But
Mhm.
then there's also those expectations and pressures from your own heart, right? Like, are you listening to that inner calling? Are you listening to, that guidance from within? Are you like, no, 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 that's not for me, or you know how to do that? You got to be kidding me. Like, yeah, sure, that's for
It's
Sarah's
for
dream,
someone
but that's
else.
not Anita's dream. Yeah,
That's right, yeah. Oh, I always say that voice is the softest voice in the room, right? And I think especially as women, I think we get trained at a very young age not to listen to it because it
Yes,
usually tends to make other people uncomfortable. Like, what do you mean you want to quit
absolutely.
your corporate job and start something? What are you talking about, right? And I think the to kind of fight for it. And I don't mean fight like really, but to take a stand for that smallest voice in the room, the softest voice in the room, it can be really challenging. And I think it's kind of a skill like any other that we kind of have to practice and learn how to lean into that. But I think it's so helpful, I think, for anybody listening too, if you've had that like that softest voice in the room in the back of your head, to know you're not alone in having that experience and know you're not crazy. It is telling you something, right? And then actually how to make that work is a whole other ballgame. But when you were talking about the smorgasbord of your past, right? I was laughing. I am recently reading a book called The Surrender Experiment. It's by the same author. I'm really bad at authors today, who wrote The Untethered Soul. A lot of people know
I will
that one.
definitely look it up.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, I love that one. Yeah. So, but anyway, the surrender experiment, which is just fascinating. I mean, it's his journey of diving deep into meditation and understanding the observer, not the talker,
Yeah.
the voice that we all have in our heads, right? But really observing that voice as the higher self, as the capital S self. And what happens when you don't listen to the, oh my God, should I wear that? I don't look good in red. I should be wearing that. I should have done that. I shouldn't get another degree. No, I should, like that thing that doesn't ever stop, right? To sort of look back and say, what is the higher self actually saying? And that he would surrender to that higher self over the voice, because the higher self is a softer voice, right? It doesn't speak the same way. And like I was saying, that's a skill. And it seems like you've really developed that skill, Anita. Like you've really taken the time to develop that skill. It's not easy to do.
It's not easy to do. I also think that I think we all have that ability, but I think that I was given the gift of an opportunity to embrace it earlier than most would. So I
Mm.
taught myself to meditate when I was 7 years old. It was more out of necessity, but again, it was also one of those things like that Hay House, ping just kind of fell into my lap. Like though that
Wow.
was kind of my toolkit for survival when I was young. And
Wow.
so I've always been very spiritually centered. And that's part of like the whole concept of me finding myself was really when I was able to embrace all of those aspects of me because, being a little bit woo, right? Reading cards, like sometimes like listening to that inner voice, like that kind of raises some eyebrows, it's not for everybody. And also coming to terms that you're not for everybody. That was another big lesson that kind of came to me through this journey because we all want belonging and acceptance. And we all go through, those traditional forms of, success, whether it be like, after this degree, I do this degree and that makes me, check, I fulfilled so and so's, or like people will look at me and say, okay, you did the right thing. But, to be honest, like I still have part of me that's involved in the corporate world. And
Mm.
when I share the woo side, sometimes you can see that wall. Like people are like, oh, I don't know. And other people are a little bit really curious and inquisitive because there's those, closet woo people that are always like, what is all this like hype about crystals and manifestation? And, so you can speak whatever language resonates with you, whatever definition of success resonates with you. My job is not
Mm.
to change that for anyone, but my job is to really unlock that higher wisdom and calling. So I tend to, because I come from such a corporate world, attract some people that are really, I'm surprised that they want to work with me because I do speak that language, but I would never
Right.
force that down. But they're curious, right? So this versus the spiritual curious versus spiritual seekers that are like, hey, I want to strengthen that bond. And I really do know and listen, like I do know what I'm meant to do. I do have that calling. So now what
Mm.
do I do? What are those next steps? So it's about again overcoming those voices in your mind. It's about figuring out what the next steps are and also like constantly doing that deep inner work to make sure that it's aligned to who you are, what you want to create out of your life, because we're all co-creators in this. We don't get a second shot. Like there's no second chances. This is
Yeah.
it,
Well,
and
that's why this is
it,
called the Game On Girlfriend podcast, because
I
this isn't
love
your
that. I
practice
love
life,
that.
right? It's like, this
I
is it,
love
people.
that.
This is the one. I
Oh
love
my
that you just
God.
said that.
I
Yeah.
can't even believe it. And then like, you're talking about parents or like how do you tell people that what your inner calling is saying? I wrote
Mm.
about this in my book, The Lighthouse Project too. I was in my 40s when this happened to me, right? I was like
Wow.
in my 40s when I got restructured, and all of a sudden this corporate identity is just taken away from me. And
Mm.
I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, I've been having this calling for a bit. I've started dipping my hands over here. I know I'm a lot of this, but I haven't brought any of this into here. I know I've got all these different skills. And now what? And it was kind of a very terrifying place to be in, to not
Yeah.
actually have a plan or a recipe book to follow. And then also to tell your parents, like, I mean, in my case, we talked about them earlier, that I kind of wanted to just figure it out and do my own thing. And they were like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I was so scared of like their reaction, but it was
Sure.
actually so incredibly supportive. But it can be a very terrifying thing to reinvent yourself and then to tell other people, whether it be your coworkers, your significant other, your family members, that you are trying to do something different or you want to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
So reinvention and pivoting, especially I'd say like kind of later in life where you've got kids, like, I can't tell you how many times I tossed and turned thinking, does this mean we have to sell our house? Does this
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
what are my kids getting? Like, am I setting a good example? Like, all of those things, but it's so entrepreneurship and reinvention, pivoting, like whatever life choices you make, if they're different, deciding to take a different course of action, it's not for the faint of heart. It's really, but it is so liberating when you can follow, like march to the beat of your own drum and find your own path. And, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. But I think you're speaking to something important because it takes a lot of courage, right? And not everybody has the support you had. And I think the heartbreak in that, at least for me, observing that is when people don't feel like they have a supportive environment, is they don't talk about it. And the rub there is that when you share it, that's when it can grow, right? Because if you say to somebody, right, like, I'm thinking of doing XYZ, and they're like, oh my gosh. And then 3 days later, they run into somebody who needs that exact thing you were just talking about. Or maybe they run into someone and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a professor, I teach that. And they're like, oh my gosh, you have to sign up for their class. Like, that's kind of where I want to say the magic, but that's where the magic can happen, is when we share our dreams. And so it takes so much courage to initially do that, especially if maybe your primary environment isn't that supportive of it. But then to find the humans that you can share your dreams with, like you did, to help expand it, because that's when things start to happen. Is like, you're like, I wasn't even talking about that, but you mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to someone, and then all of a sudden you get an email in your inbox. You're like, this has never happened before," right? Or whatever like that. I think it's so great that you're sharing this, because I'm sure, I would bet like my bottom dollar that somebody listening is like, I can't tell people what I really want to do. And I think it's wise to know who you can share it with, right? And thank God for
Yeah.
so many people who do have the awesome, supportive, like primary unit that they can share with, who then will help them grow it as well. But it's just so important for us to acknowledge that it's really scary to do that sometimes. At least
Yeah,
I
it
think it
comes
is.
down to that.
Yeah.
It comes down to that need of belonging and acceptance, right? We just want to belong. We just want to feel like other people will approve, that we're accepted into whatever group or, so yeah, I would encourage everyone to acknowledge the vulnerability behind it, because you can't get around that. The only way out through, like, is through, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
again, there's no second chances. This is it. Like, what do
Oh,
you want to do? Like, are you going to have any regrets when you're on your deathbed thinking, oh my God, I really wish, instead of like, working for as a corporate cog, making, 37 and a half hours a week and just having a paycheck, that I was able to pursue that thing that just like lit my, like, everybody's vision and version is different. Like, don't let anyone tell you what it is that you should or could be doing. It's, what do you want to be doing, right? What do you feel that you've been gifted with, to share with the world, right? How can you
yes.
make your mark?
And to be honest about that to yourself first, obviously, and then
Yes.
to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Anita, if someone's listening right there, right now, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like starting to spark things for me. I think what I want to ask you is, what do you wish more people knew about that little nudge, about that little poke we get? What do you wish people knew about that?
That's a great question. So I wish people would know that it is there for you. It is
Mhm.
your unique blueprint to your definition of soulful success. It is up to you to decide whether you are going to open yourself up to receive it,
Mm,
or if you're going to block it. That's a decision too. It's not for everybody. And if you're going to block it, then you are deciding in that moment that you're not going to live up to your gift.
that hit. I got that one.
Right? And I think
Yeah.
the pandemic has really
Yeah.
changed the way that we have viewed our lives a bit, right? That a opportunity for us to, like, literally the world locked down, right? We locked down. So many of us went internally, right? So many of us took that opportunity to revisit how we want to show up in life. Like, it's, the great resignation was a movement that came out of it,
Yes.
right? Like, so many people thought, I don't want this kind of job anymore. This
Yeah.
is not worth it. So, is saying no to that inner calling, how are you going to feel by doing that? And saying that you hear it and that you want to go forward with it doesn't necessarily mean that you like it's not 0 to 100. It doesn't have to be. If you need to just dip your toes in a little bit to get used to that water before, or whether you're that, person who goes into a swimming pool and just needs to put their feet in and then a little bit more, or whether you're that person that like cannonballs in, you know, that's up to you. But my point is like, are you going to accept the gift that you've been given? Are you going to accept the opportunity that you've been given? Are you going to accept the happiness that awaits you? Right? Or are you comfortable where you are? And that there's no judgment either. There's no judgment. It's a loving universe. It's a loving voice. It's a loving gift that you've been given, right? But are you going to take it? Are you going to take it or not? That's up to you.
I love that. And I think it's important what you just said too, because I know, because I'm a big believer. I always say 3 people tell you you're drunk, lie down. And I mean that like by you get 3 nudges, like you might want to check that out. Like, but I think what you said is really important because sometimes when people hear us speaking like this, right, about like, oh, just follow the nudge and then magic, right? They're like, "Well, but to not judge that reaction either, that it's okay to
Yeah.
have that initial like, Well, Anita, I think we could probably talk for about 342 hours, somewhere in that range. But before we go, I do have one more question. What is like
Sure.
one tip you would give somebody who's like on the verge of actually transforming?
I would say that, we're talking about listening to the inner voice. And so a key clue card would be listening to your energy. So your energy is like your gas tank, and you always want to keep it on high, right? And so it's about elevating your vibration, tuning into your emotions, your energy. All of that is kind of the clue that you're heading in the right direction. So it'll support your manifestations, but it also supports kind of clearing out that energy of fear and opening yourself to that expansiveness and the abundance that your inner voice is trying to lead you towards, whatever that version is for yourself.
I
So
love
keep
that.
that energy high.
I hope somebody heard that. You know who you are, who's listening. You know who you are. You just heard that. Let's go. Let's go. All right. Anita, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I understand you have a free gift for all of our listeners. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So we were just talking about the keeping the energy tank high. So I've developed a free PDF guide. It's called 10 Dopamine Hits and Spiritual Lifts. It's the easiest way to just raise your vibration, whether you're feeling unmotivated, like stuck, unproductive, or just looking for a quick boost or shift of energy. So download it. You can find it on the show notes that I'll send it to you, Sarah, and maybe you can share it with your audience. Yeah, quick, easy, painless, lots of fun, and it'll just keep that energy high so that you can listen to that inner voice, or you can just open yourself up to a better day ahead, whatever that looks like for you.
I love that. All right, you guys, those of you watching on YouTube, we will have that link underneath this video. For those listening, it will be in the show notes. Anita, thank you so much for spending your energy and time with our girlfriends.
Thank
today.
you. Thank you. Thank you.